So we're going into the final session. My mission here is to get you out of this room by 10 minutes past 4. The session we're having will be led by Ed Cable, Finding Harmony, Establishing Interoperable Standards for Payments among DPIs, Digital Public Goods, for G2P and Social Protection. Ed? I'll invite Ed to come up. I know we have some panelists on Zoom as well. So once Ed is here, Ed will introduce the panelists, those joining us physically. I think Karim is joining us, right? Yeah. Karim, do you want to join us as well? Where's Karim? Ah, there he goes. Okay, yeah. Are we starting right now or in 5 minutes? Right now. Okay. Do you guys want to just grab a seat? I'll get your mics. All right. Then I'll see if we can get the folks up on Zoom. We can get the Zoom folks on screen. Yeah, you'll see them here in a minute.
Okay, thanks everyone. It's nice to be back in person at a convening once again. So I'm just going to start off by briefly introducing our panelists and the goal of what we're aiming to cover today. And then we're going to cover a few different topics. But first off, my name's Ed Cable. I oversee the MIFOS initiative. In person, we have Karim. He's the CEO of Paces Labs. He and his team have been actively involved in the deployment of payment systems amongst many nations worldwide. And then online, we've got 3 different panelists. We've got Wes Brown, who's the product owner for the GovStack initiative within Dial. And then we've got Vijay Mari from ITU. He's been helping to coordinate that program there and overseeing the payments building block working group. And then we've also got Vijay Vijini, who should hopefully be online soon. And he's representing G2P Connect as the technical consultant there. Oh, and then just one moment. We've got a few slides that we're going to advance through. So, okay. Yeah. So this is just a slide on our panelists here. And then first off, I just wanted to set a little bit of the context of what we wanted to cover today. So MIFOS, in our role, we've had the opportunity to play a key role in a number of the different growing movements around digital public goods and digital public infrastructure. I know Steve is going to be leading some sessions looking more closely at G2P Connect and some of these other initiatives. But I think for many in the room, you're hopefully somewhat aware of some of the initiatives you see on the screen here, like GovStack, like the Digital Public Goods Alliance, like the Digital Convergence Initiative. But all these parallel efforts are ongoing right now, and they're working to identify standards for integration and interoperability amongst digital public goods, especially around use cases like G2P payments and whatnot. So the main goal of today's session is really first and foremost to help to understand like what are these parallel efforts around defining these standards. And then we're going to look more closely at one of the standards for the payment building block itself, which the MIFOS initiative along with Karim's team is working on as part of GovStack. And then the last part of our panel is going to be more interactive, question and answer, just looking at what are the practical implications for DPGs and DPIs as these standards are being defined. So I'm going to pass the stage on to Vijay. Hopefully he's online now from G2P Connect. He's going to go through some of the G2P Connect efforts, and then Wes is going to do the same around what Dial is doing around GovStack, and then likewise Vijay from ITU. And then I'll have a few questions for them around how the efforts are aiming to be harmonized and aligned and how that's having a practical implication on us as DPGs and DPIs in this room. So Vijay, I'll pass it on to you to speak to the efforts of G2P Connect. Hopefully you've got the floor and you're able to come off mute. So. Let me fast forward to Wes, because I think Vijay maybe didn't have a chance to join just yet. So Wes, I'll let you introduce your role on GovStack and then the efforts GovStack's taking right now. So.
Sure. Thanks, Ed. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person, but thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this way, even remotely. So my name is Wesley Brown. I am an associate director and the product owner for GovStack, working with the Digital Impact Alliance. Been involved working with DPGs and systems that utilize DPGs for quite a while, about 15 years. I was the product manager for Open LMIS previous to this, and then had been involved as a contributor and working alongside Open MRS in the past. So I'm fairly familiar with the space, both as a user and contributor, as well as somebody helping to kind of work on the inside of these projects. If you can go to the next slide. I can't see the slide, so I don't know what we're looking at right now, but I'm assuming right now we're looking at the slide related to what GovStack, the partners that are involved with GovStack. So GovStack, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's a multi-partner, multi-organization effort that is led by 4 different groups: the ITU, DIAL, the Digital Impact Alliance, GIZ, as well as the government of Estonia. We came together and started the GovStack initiative, seeing that there was a need for a more holistic approach to whole of government design and digital service distribution and development. And so that's what we have been working on over the last couple of years. If you go to the next slide, you can get just a really quick perspective on how does this fit into this discussion today, and where GovStack actually fits. And once again, I can't see the slides, but I think we're seeing the one now, hopefully, where you're looking at how both building blocks and DPGs in the bottom left-hand corner can be utilized to provide DPI, so that digital public infrastructure. And I'll get into what building blocks are in just a moment. But the building block approach is what we in the GovStack initiative are using to provide that whole of government approach for government services. And so we see that this approach as being able to tie together various DPGs in such a way that you can have what I kind of think of as like a collective, the connective tissue that you would have between systems, in such a way that you can kind of plug and play different systems and be able to leverage that work across specific work silos, so that you don't have, your ID system for your health sphere and your ID system for your financial sphere, and each one, being their own thing, having them be able to work together. So can we go to the next slide, which is what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we're trying to get the slides advancing here, Wes. So just
gotcha.
Maybe pause one moment, because
that's like it's so great. When you see it, you're just going to be blown away, I promise. There we go. It's probably looking very small for you that are sitting in the back of that nice room that you have there. But so that what you see here is this idea of how we have these building blocks and digital public goods that come together to help be able to facilitate and in some cases provide that digital public infrastructure. If you go to the next slide, I'll wait for that to show up. There we go. This then gives a perspective on, okay, when I'm talking about this building block approach, what am I talking about? And it's this picture that we have here in the middle. We have these foundational blocks of functionality that you can have. For example, things like ID, security, registration, and then appropriate for today's discussion, payment, which is what VJ is the lead of. These different foundational blocks provide functionality that can be used by other building blocks that kind of sit on top of that. So that could be things like workflow or other higher level services. And then there can be even higher level building blocks that would be more kind of like middleware, or even more application specific content that sit on top of those common application blocks. And the idea is that these things, using the terminology like blocks, like Legos, can snap together. And obviously, this idea is something that a lot of people have worked on for in a lot of different ways. Our approach is to be able to have a holistic perspective of how these different functional areas can work together, and how they can satisfy both use cases, but also be able to provide digital services for governments in a way that you really can be able to not be beholden to one specific solution for each one of these building blocks, but be able to swap out different ones if you want to down the road. I'm trying to give a very quick overview. This is a 30-minute topic in and of itself. But the idea here is that we have this whole of government approach that allows us to be able to reuse digital services and get a greater return on investment, which you can see there in the notes. So that's very, very quick perspective on what GovStack is, what we're trying to do. We are just coming up to the release of our 1.0 publication, sometime early this quarter, we hope, or soon this quarter, I should say. And so that will be the first time we're publishing a version of the specifications, use cases, and example implementations that GovStack has been working on for a while. So we're excited to get that out the door here pretty soon. And then I think I'll hand it over to, do you want me to give it to VJ to go into the payments building block specific information?
Yeah, well, we actually take one step back now that VJ Virgini's on, and we'll hand the floor over to him, Wes.
Sounds good.
Stand
Thanks.
by, we'll have some questions for you soon. Thanks, Wes. So VJ, I'm just going back to your slides. So.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, you're ready to go now. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm representing as a technical architect for G2P Connect initiative, and you'll see a lot of commonalities among all of these, and the whole point of this session is how to harmonize among all of these activities that we are working at a global scale. And yes, from the mission perspective, that's comforting that it's, again, G2P Connect working towards architectural blueprint, the focus primarily being G2P aspect of it, from government to person payments focus, while the DPI and the social protection has much larger umbrella of use cases, which we'll talk about it in the next half an hour as well. And the primary goal is to get the interoperability nature of it, a solution blueprint that works for G2P use case, and how to leverage the DPIs for creating an interoperable specs for the use case. While it is at the DPI level, they are also open for much larger Rails as a public infrastructure to support much wider use cases across different sectors and segments. And of course, how to collaborate and unify the integration of sandbox when all of these components come together. So that's kind of the larger mission of G2P Connect. Right? If you can go to the next slide, the key differentiator factor comes in. You can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So in terms of providing these digital assets, be it architecture blueprint, integration specifications, the sandbox, or the assessment guides in terms of how the solutions that can come together to solve a G2P Connect, and from a nuanced perspective of design and architecting level, keeping countries in focus. And if you look on the right-hand side, be it the government, ministry departments who are the primary demand side, stakeholders of bringing these use cases, DPIs, to life, working along the agencies, development agencies and funding agencies, like all of us in this room, from different partners' perspective, and try to work along with proprietary existing solutions that exist in the countries, with the DPGs and open source initiatives that are also part of the important players in terms of bringing the solutions to life. The key aspect is that if from a country perspective, one looks at it, this is the natural real landscape wherein there are existing systems, baggage that comes from the past, and the new initiatives have to be incrementally built upon. And how one can create that larger North Star and then try to have these interoperable standards and the blueprint from a long-term perspective, and create that roadmap for that smooth transition to get to that ideal place. So that's the differentiator from the G2P Connect perspective, to enable these interfaces and blueprints to get to that journey from a country and the use case perspective. And this, we will be talking more in terms of how these all unifications are going to happen from all of these other initiatives as well, to get to this larger objective. And the G2P Connect is being an open source initiative and collaboration. All the stakeholders that we see in the slide will contribute and leverage from this collective is the thought process and hope. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so from a G2P Connect perspective, it is an open source effort. It's all about interfaces, design templates, and creating a blueprint from a G2P point of view, and also to leverage existing and new systems in the ecosystem so that it is more realistic from the country point of view, how that works. and DPGs being the important player in terms of the solution. What G2P Connect is not is definitely not a solution or a technology vendor or a system integrator to bring life to this thing, but to be an enabler for all of these players to be successful in this endeavor. If you can go to the next slide. Yeah, the design principles looks common and efficient in terms of any large scale platform. The goal of these design principles is to adhere to these core principles, and which requires its own session in terms of enumerating all of this into the blueprint and to the solution, how that translates itself. And that is where, as a collective, we are all working behind the scenes to converge and then work to get that common play, be it the sandbox that can be used for integrations, or be it the specifications itself, how they can leverage with each other, while keeping the end landscape of the real challenges that exist at not only the digital infrastructure, but real infrastructure that exists at an infrastructure level, be it offline or remote access, how the trust, privacy, all of these can come together to create a scalable solution. If you go to the next slide. So this is the technical architectural blueprint is to unbundle the components in terms of what, from a G2P Connect perspective, how the different layers and reusability of these DPIs can come together and create these interfaces focused on G2P use cases together, so that the and interoperate and integrate with the larger umbrella of use cases for each of these building blocks that may exist, that solves for the larger set of problems. Be it, let's take an example of civil registry. The civil registry's core is some of these are foundational layers that will work not only for G2P problem, but any education, healthcare, etc. as well. And how can we now harmonize the interfaces when we have these interplay of components coming together? And be it, some of these may or may not exist in a country, and they may or may have a custom solution or a vendor product as well. And how can the solution for a larger use case come together is the intent here. And then if we have those interoperable open specifications, then it is all about building to those specifications from across the solution providers to solve the problem of the use case. So it is like working from use case level and drilling down to the features and interfaces to enable that whole solution to come to life. And with that, what we are working towards is to, Ed, if you can go to the next slide, come up with those core interfaces that will help enable that interplay. And this is just an indicative list, and the intent and thought process is how to harmonize these across all the players in the system and enable the ecosystem players like SIs and DPGs to create non-linear scale solutions by having these interfaces that are open to go to market faster and cheaper as well, and keeping countries in focus to get these out. With that, this quick brief about G2P Connect, and we'll be happy to answer more discussions in the coming session. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Vijay. That helps set the stage well. So Vijay, I'm going to pass it on to you just to share a little bit more from the ITU perspective around GovStack. And then I'll talk a little bit and have some questions for you around how we're trying to align these parallel efforts. So.
Okay, thank you, Ed, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear my audio okay on your side.
Yeah, all good. So.
Okay, thank you. So on my side, I'm going to talk a bit about the payments building block, the functionality of the payments building block that is being developed under GovStack. So I'm Vijay Moria. I'm the payments working group lead under GovStack, and also focal point for digital financial services and digital currency at the International Telecommunications Union. So under GovStack, we just heard from Wes talking a bit about the different building blocks, and payments is one of the let's say the core components of the GovStack, where we are looking at the requirements and functionalities that's needed to implement the common use cases for government payments. So basically, the vision of the payments building block is to support all the payments related to G2P, that is government to person and person to government, P2G payments, and we can also, by extension, consider also B2G and G2B payments. And the objective of the payments building block is to also enable digital payments for government services to be initiated electronically, validated, tracked, processed, reconciled, and also audited in a secure manner. So as you can see on the slide, so the main objective here is to basically connect different social benefit programs into a shared infrastructure, which will enable the connection of the ID systems, so that the information regarding beneficiaries, their personal, their ID information, and also the payment account information doesn't need to be kept in the programs or the beneficiary programs databases. So these could be held, where we have the shared infrastructure. And then this will also support disbursement of the different payments across different access points and different payment channels, like supporting non-cash payment channels such as mobile money, bank accounts, or even vouchers for those who do not have bank accounts, taking into account the low resource conditions of developing and low income countries. So if we can go to the next slide. So basically, under the payments building block, what we're doing is we're developing an architecture and functional specifications for supporting G2P and P2G payments. And we are doing this by leveraging digital public goods and using open source software. And we, through the architecture and functional specifications, we're also using developing a standard set of open APIs for implementing those functionalities. So the open APIs would be used by the other building blocks that would need to be connected with the payments building blocks, for example, for initiating the payments or for requesting a specific payment service to be processed and so on. So the objective of the payments building block, in a sense, would enable different building blocks to make use of the payment facilities and making use of those open APIs, which will enable also interoperability across the different programs, and also the different payment channels that needs for disbursements to take place. Now, when we are looking at the G2P payments specifically, we also take into account the payment scenarios, payment infrastructure scenarios in different countries. So we have different what we call flows, basically taking into consideration whether there is a switch, or whether there is actually connectivity in the back end, for example, for linking the different systems, the beneficiary systems with for example, the FMIS or with the payment gateway directly. So as you can see on this slide, in this case, for example, in this first option, we do not have a payment portal in this case, which means that the lump sum payments, for pre-funding the accounts at the level of the payment service providers, would be sent either in a paper form to the treasury, who would then send this afterwards to the central bank for the pre-funding to take place. And the same thing for the retail scroll. This will also happen in a paper-based manner, and that's currently how a lot of the systems are in a number of government today. And then if we go to the next slide, which is the second option, which we are trying to maybe also, I'm not sure why this doesn't appear well on the screen here, but in what we're trying to do under the payments building block is to basically have this payment portal, which will facilitate this process of forwarding the lump sum payment requests to the FMIS and then to the Treasury single account at the central bank for the pre-funding of the payment service providers accounts. And then afterwards, there is also the validation of the different retail payment scrolls that will move from different beneficiary programs through the payment portals for the disbursements to happen at the level of the payment service providers. And then the reconciliation and tracking of the payments happen at the level of the payment portal. So that's what we're trying to do under the payments building block, is to provide this functionality within the payments portal, and also to also provide the what we call these different flows, these APIs that we need to connect with the different entities that we see on the slide. If we can go to the next slide, please. So very quickly, so if we, So in terms of logical architecture, in terms of a building block form for G2P payments, the payments building block will have a number of components. So we'll be using an account mapper, for example, for mapping the IDs of national IDs of the beneficiaries to the payments account, so that this information doesn't need to be kept at the level of the beneficiary or registration databases, and to a certain extent also hide these these information, make it more secure in terms of protecting the personal privacy of the beneficiaries. And then the payments hub is where the processing of the payments, bulk payments, will take place. And during the processing of the payments, there will be the account lookups that will be performed using the account mapper and also the modular loop oracle for finding the the payment address to which the payments needs to be routed to the appropriate FSPs. And there is also a voucher engine to take care of for voucher payments to cater basically for people who do not have bank accounts. And you can see there's also the identity building block, which will be connected to the payments hub for basically the validation of the functional ID for the different payments that needs to be made, and also for the voucher redemption. So that's a bit the architecture that we are proposing for G2P payments. And we are also working with for example G2P Connect in terms of making sure that they can also integrate their APIs into our architecture as well. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Vijay. And before we pass it on to Kareem, who's going to give a closer look at the payments building block and what APIs are being defined, what use cases are being demoed, and what assumptions are being made, and how different DPGs play a role in that, I've got a couple quick questions for our panelists. So I know, Steve and Paul and others have been engaged in these initiatives so far, but could you talk a little bit about the approach you've taken to properly engage the various stakeholders like DPGs and whatnot, as you're trying to define these generic requirements that are agnostic of any one solution or product? So this is open to any of the panelists online. So
I can comment from the GovStack side of things.
okay.
The initial part of our engagements for each one of the building block teams that we work on are we form what's called a working group. And that working group is composed of anybody who is a domain expert in that domain. We try to get representatives from DPGs as well as from implementers who are using DPGs. So we try to involve the organizations and the partners who are involved in each space to be part of this process of helping us to define what a building block looks like. A building block creates a specification, and so we want that specification that details what is the functionality that is required in each one of these domain areas to be as representative as possible of the current work that's going on in the space, as well as where we think that space is going to be going. So that's like the initial area that we try to get engagement. And then on the back end, as we're actually rolling these specifications out, one of the key pieces that we try to do is get feedback from people who were not involved in the building of those building blocks, to give us feedback and try to continue that feedback loop, so that each time we're coming up to making changes and publishing those changes, we're getting feedback from as broad a cross section of the community as possible.
Thanks, Wes. And then this last question, I'll pass it on to either one of the VJs. So I know, Wes was stating earlier that the 1.0 specifications for the building blocks is coming out soon. And then VJ, I know, you're working with the first draft of the integration specifications for G2P Connect. I think as we all can attest, there's limited resources within the various DPGs. So what efforts are you taking to help align these standards such that DPGs aren't having to try to adhere to different competing standards for interoperability and interaction?
So this is for me, right, Vijay Ujjini?
Yeah, either one of you. So
Good.
you can go ahead, Vijay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting, and considering the from a use case perspective and from a DPG perspective, the whole point of interoperable specification is to ensure the specs adhere to some of the non-functional, functional requirements as well as equally as it's required. At the same time, working with DPGs and bringing the country angle to address some of the non-functional aspects of it is where some of the G2P Connect initiative to harmonize the interoperable specifications across building blocks, so that taking a use case as an example, and then when we have in a solution, any specific typical solution of where all the DPGs have to come together to create the real value of a DPI for reusability of the underlying rails for various solutions, and how to harmonize the interfaces so that they work across different segments and within a given use case context, to be more specific, and the integrations become seamless. And that's where I think some of the conversations and interactions are happening as we speak. And the hope is that the convergence will happen in coming months to ensure the unified solution is a win-win for all the stakeholders, be it the DPGs, the partners, and the countries, which is more important to get that aligned.
Okay, thanks, Vijay. And we'll return to this topic towards the end of our panel when we talk about practical ways DPGs can get involved. But let me pass it on to Kareem, who'll give a closer look at the payments building block itself.
Sure. Hi, this is Kareem Jindani. So, we talked a bit about GovTech and how we are trying to harmonize between various standards. My team, along with the whole consortium, which is now working on the actual payments building block, had this rather unenvious task to create that harmony at the API level. And when we look at these type of payments, G2P payments, we have been talking a lot about doing the payments instantly since morning, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. But these payments essentially are bulk payments, which happen in large quantity. So there has been some work done already, obviously, as I understand, on Moja Loop side for processing of bulk payments. So the approach we are taking is that on one side, we have G2P Connect, which has been working on some API specifications. So our team is interacting with them, and plus whatever public goods are available and already built. We are trying to see how we can harmonize with them. So this initiative is to create a sandbox as a POC for demoing all the flows around G2P and P2G both. I'll focus on G2P part because of the today's topic. So we saw this diagram. I slightly altered it for this presentation. So this registration building block, and you see on the left side, there are certain building blocks. When we talk about a G2P payment, there are a lot of pre-processing steps. There are conditional cash transfer, there are unconditional cash transfers. Those who are familiar with cash transfer programs, you might have come across various variations. So in essence, the payment building block is just going to process the payments part, but there would be a lot of pre-processing, beneficiary enrollment, calculating the amount of payments to be done, maintaining the conditionalities. So all of those aspects are done in the registration building block, and there where we are going to rely again on certain softwares which are already built, open source softwares. And so there is within the payments building block, what we are using, a couple of software components which we are designing. One is then account mapper, slightly different from what the Oracle in Mojaloop is, and I'll come to that in next few slides. And this is based on requirements, how when we are interacting with the team and who has designed the use case, that what kind of functionality is required. At the core, there's payments hub, which is already integrated with a payment system, Mojaloop. So for transfer of payment messages or confirmation of credits, and keeping a record of as an initiator. And then we have a voucher engine, which is again a bespoke component, because when we talk about G2P payments, we needed to support multiple payment modalities. So this was for one of the first discussion which we had, that we can't think of beneficiary in one spectrum, that every beneficiary has an account. They can have a bank account, they can have a mobile wallet or electronic money issuer account. And there could be many beneficiaries in many G2P scenarios where they do not have any store of value. So how do we make payments to them? So typically voucher-based payments has been used as a methodology. Now for the first two variations, where the beneficiary has certain source of value, we have by and large looked at the design principle of doing bulk push payments. But for voucher modalities, we had to design something, I would say it is closer to request to pay scenario, but slightly within even the voucher based payments, there are multiple variations. For example, in some scenarios, the ground reality is that the voucher has to be authenticated and the person has to be paid. But in some other scenarios, implementation scenarios, the executing agency for that social protection program may need not just to authenticate the voucher, but also to authenticate the person itself while they are redeeming the voucher. So in that case, we connect into the identity building block during the process of redeeming. So those are two variations within the voucher payments which we have worked upon. Slightly more elaborate pictorial of a sandbox environment. So on the left-hand side, there are various building blocks, and what GovStack has taken an approach is that there's some layer called information mediation. So basically to standardize the APIs and the interaction between various building blocks. So once a contract is established with information mediation layer, then that controls the flow, which building block can call which APIs, and what kind of interactions, and also to put a certain standard to the API specifications. So various building blocks talk to the payments building block, where we have a payments hub as a component. So, but we start with the ID account mapper, which holds information where the registration building blocks provide this information about the beneficiaries, and due to some privacy considerations, what approach was taken, that we created a concept to identify the beneficiary using a functional ID. And you can think of functional ID as a token which composed of some sort of foundational ID. So a person can have a national ID, which is their foundational ID, but that is some private data which does not need to travel across all the systems and reside everywhere. So that foundational ID is part of the identity building block, and combining that foundational ID along with the identifier that which government institution is carrying out the disbursement and what is the program for which they are carrying out the disbursement. So essentially, if we combine all these elements, it forms a token which represents a particular beneficiary of a particular G2P program. So that data, what account mapper holds is that for this particular program, this beneficiary will be paid using their account, using their mobile money wallet, or using their voucher. And this can also be extended to hold alias as well, in case the account information need not to be stored or is not available. So why this concept was implemented? Because if we look at G2P as a whole, a single beneficiary may be part of multiple G2P programs, and various ministries or various programs may have their different requirements based on their program. So someone might have a disbursement value which is a very low value, and they might need to do voucher-based payments. Or even within the same program, the beneficiary profile is as such that some people have accounts and some people do not have accounts. And there may be a point where they're getting that account information. So this kind of structure provides some flexibility that as the programs run or as the programs evolve, the payment modalities can be changed by the registration building block. So that was one of the reasons we created this account mapper structure, which does now, hopefully it's clear that it does some other functionality. We also use the same account mapper for storing similar kind of data for the merchants or agents who are going to be doing the request to pay for redemption. So this has dual purpose in this GovStack payments building block. I'll just jump into the payments. So the bulk payments or push payments, as we see, it's typically a three-step process that you need to pre-validate the accounts, or if I'm talking about push payments right now, not about the voucher-based payments. So if you have a set of accounts, then once they are discovered, then you need to pre-validate with the institution. And then you have to execute the clearing instructions from the government side to the financial institution. And then finally a confirmation by the payee institution that all accounts are credited. And that confirmation piece is very important from a reconciliation perspective, because again, thinking from a difference between an instant payment and a bulk payment, you can think of G2P payments happening in very large batches. And those batches, when they are delivered as form of a payment instruction to the participant may take some time to process and credit those. So the confirmation from the participant eventually of that all accounts are credited or some accounts were not credited, that information, that record needs to travel at the end of this whole process. So typically, when a government entity will provide the batch of payment instructions with the functional IDs and the amounts, this is what they need to provide to this building block. This is the minimum set of information. And we do pre-validation in the sense that within the payments building block, we verify that these functional IDs are registered. we discover the payment modality attached to them, and then if it's account or mobile money, then send to the respective DFSP to validate them, who will check that the account exists and can be credited. So just the existence of account is not enough, but it also needs to apply all the business logic checks, because in certain countries, mobile money accounts have a certain, most countries actually, there's an upper limit. So if someone is receiving some social protection money or some other kind of social transfer and their account cannot take credit, so those kind of checks the FSPs have to apply. And this I call pre-validation, because the idea is that before we send the payment instructions and clearing instructions, we try to ascertain as much as possible that we only send those payments which have a higher probability of going through and getting completed immediately. So those accounts can be excluded at that initial level of validation. So we did some use case sequence diagrams just to visualize this. Sorry, this clicker. So, I mean, in this particular diagram, the source building block is sending through information mediation layer to the payments building block a bulk request with a certain batch ID that these are the payment instructions to execute. And what the payments building block over here we have shown in this particular diagram is talking to the payee banks to pre-validate the accounts. Now, there could be multiple variations over here. So just to clear out that this could be done with an intermediate system also. So for example, if at a national level there is a payment system which supports this kind of information exchange between this building block and the payee banks, and they are already connected into it, then this could be done through that existing interface also. The idea over here is to just show that what happens. So if the payee bank gets 1,000 accounts and 1,000 instructions, and it just says that I can process 998 of them, but 2 of them I can't process. So those 292 accounts get excluded, and then the payments building block now can proceed to the next step, which is to sorry, I think one slide is missing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there was next step was to process the payments, and in processing the payments, we have actually because the slide is missing, so I'll just explain verbally. I mean, we have studied like how Mojaloop has implemented the bulk transfers functionality.
I think it's the next slide. It's just
Okay. Yeah, it's here. So, I mean, the bulk transfers, the way it's implemented in Mojaloop is that you pass on a batch of payments as bulk transfers, and then it would perform the splitting function between the institutions. Now, in many of the existing payment systems or the infrastructures which might be already in place, this splitting of payments, if the system is following something like a Swift MT format or ISO 222 format, each batch can be addressed only to one DFSP. So what we have suggested is that the payment building block can do that splitting between the various institutions. What it allows it to do that if the government institution is sending one batch of instructions which carry, let's say, payments into 5 institutions. So it would create 5 different batches and process them one by one through the payment system. So what we are clear is that within the payments building block, what we are articulating is that the clearing and settlement function still resides with the payment system, but there could be some pre-processing work which can be done, so that this building block works with a digital public good like Mojaloop, or works with any other payment system which is already in place in that country. So that was the idea. The other aspect which we saw, like in various implementations, there's a difference that at what point the funds are actually, the liquidity is transferred in the payment system. When you push a batch of payments to an institution and it's a large batch and a large value of payment, do they get the liquidity before they can confirm all the credits, or do they get the liquidity after they've confirmed the credits? Now I understand there are again two variations which we saw. In some countries, these payments follow the standard which generally RTGS systems do, where these bulk payments, as soon as they are pushed, because the pre-validation has been done, the liquidity is also transferred. So in that case, what is essential is that we get a final credit confirmation separately from the payee bank, because as such, the payment leg has been settled or at the payment system level. So those are the various, variations which we have discussed. And now what the challenge is, that both on the payment system side and on the other building blocks for which we are writing the API specs, the idea is that to closely match with whatever work has already been done. So we have Moja Loop as a good reference for bulk payments, and we have some work done by G2P Connect on the initiation side of the payment. So that is where we are trying to harmonize the API specifications, and hopefully this work will be then published soon. Do I have some time, or?
I think we might move to the next.
Okay.
We'll skip the voucher part, Kareem. I'll just take the clicker. So.
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
yeah, we've got a couple minutes left, so I just wanted to go through a couple last questions and then maybe open the floor to any questions from the audience here. So, yeah, so this can be for either Vijay or Wes, but one of the items I wanted to discuss is, because I think this topic aligns very well with those pillars that Steve addressed at the beginning, both in working with other systems and then indirectly in advancing adoption. So I know with both G2P Connect and GovStack, there's a lot of effort to engage governments at a country level, as well as multilaterals, and this could translate into new interest in adopting DPGs and DPIs. So could you talk a little bit about how you're engaging with these stakeholders and what practical implications it might have for DPGs and DPIs and how they can be involved in this new potential adoption?
Yes. So very quickly, I think I would say that, we are trying to integrate, these DPGs and DPIs, especially DPGs, in the, the components of the payments building blocks, and trying to also provide, some open APIs that could be used in terms of, standardizing the interfaces for communications between these different DPGs and DPIs. So the sandbox that we're putting in place would help, for example, trying to see if, those other DPGs and DPIs can also be implemented in the sandbox environment and come up with ways in terms of interfacing those different components as well with the payments building block. And in terms of, for example, with G2P Connect, we are already working together with them in terms of trying to see how the use case also could be implemented or integrated in the sandbox, to see the interoperability there in terms of their APIs, being able to work with the sandbox that we are putting in play. So these are some maybe of the measures that we're looking on.
Thanks,
on
Vijay. And Vijay, I know G2P Connect has been very deliberate of how you're engaging with countries and how that renewed interest or demand might trickle down to DPGs. Can you speak to some of the efforts there?
So here we are primarily looking in terms of trying to identify from a solution point of view, even if one of the solution identity solution doesn't exist in a context, how can the whole DPG solution from, if the other DPGs exist from payments and account mapping, so forth, can come to life. And that's where identifying those interfaces, like which I rightly said, to standardize those so that the existing solutions can integrate and then make those interoperable play happen on one side. And the other side is to identify the specifications to an extent such that implementations can be many possibilities, and trying to identify that minimum common denominator that is required. And that's when the standards will be successful. If we try to cook too much of it into it and then try to open up, then the agility will get lost. And trying to balance that with DPGs as part of the collaborative effort is where some of these works are continuing to happen right now.
Okay, thanks, Vijay, and we're looking forward to the G2P Connect workshop next week and all the efforts that have gone on place to help better enable collaboration. So just real quick, in 30 seconds or less, what does success look like for each of you? So for GovStack or for G2P Connect, where would you like to be in 3 years? And then we'll use the last minute here for any questions in the audience. So
I can really
Wes,
quickly.
what does success look like for you? So.
Yeah, it's that there's a vibrant ecosystem of DPGs as well as proprietary software solutions that are able to leverage the approach taken by GovStack, this building block approach, and able to be used in government settings at scale, hopefully in an interoperable way, leveraging existing standards, and where those standards don't exist, coming together to help define those standards for how these services can communicate across different building blocks in an efficient and effective manner.
Thanks, Wes. And then Vijay, from G2P Connect perspective. So.
Yeah, I fully echo with Wes there, and that's where the harmonization will happen here. And then it's to keep countries in focus and trying to enable the countries to be having these successful implementations and making that happen. So yeah, I think from a goals perspective, we're all aligned, and it's all about the journey to converge to make that happen with the countries in the process. And there's a lot of activities and building blocks that have to come, be it sandbox, be it the interfaces, so forth, that will evolve as we go. And many toolkits may also have to be built to enable the countries to move forward.
Okay, anything for you, Vijay, before we wrap up? Because I think we're at our time. So.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
just to add that, I think
the
standardization of the process for G2P is also something that's really important as well. I mean, there are different ways of implementing G2Ps, and I think for all these to happen, we also need to consider the standardization of the G2P process, not just the application, and all the different technologies, but also the process is important for these to be whatever we're building to be also be adopted by different countries. So there's also it's a whole business process re-engineering also that needs to happen at the level of countries as well. I think that would also
well, thank you.
An indicator of success.
Yeah, well, thank you, Vijay and Wes, for joining us remotely, and hopefully you'll be able to make it in person for a future Mojaloop convening. And thanks everybody who joined us in person today. Kareem and I can field any questions afterwards, so thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, I've got 3 minutes to try to see if I can make sense of everything we've heard. First, I want to address something I've been working, and so is Paul, who's online, about on G2P with G2P Connect. And you heard Vijay just say something of the lowest common denominator. I know a lot of you, I could see it in your faces of, wait, why is it that way? Mojaloop does some of those things. So as Kareem said, they have to design these building blocks in case there's no Mojaloop. So when we think about how do we interact with people with things like GovStack and G2P Connect, for all of you in the room, just remember, it's okay if Mojaloop does some of those things. We just need to identify in a country that's using a Mojaloop, maybe some of these components they don't need. But it's very important that whether or not our country uses a Mojaloop, they can accomplish what they need to accomplish. It's okay if we do more than that. We just have to know how to adjust. So, but moving past, I hope you guys can take part in what Paul's going to talk about with G2P, I think, tomorrow. But today we had some great openings this morning from Robert and Innocent. Those were absolutely amazing. I have to admit I've been a little bit tired lately, and these guys really motivated me to why we're here. So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Innocent, who's not here right now. I think Innocent brought up some great points about the importance of being able to fail and being willing to fail. And then the African Under team took us on a journey of, and then Jane with the TIPS team took us on a journey of what Tanzania has done, what Rwanda has done, what Kenya has done on their journey over the past couple of years. And then we can see where we want to go from here. But I think those were incredibly important. We also heard some of the great lessons from what WinePay has done over the past few years. And so I hope everyone took note of that. If anyone doesn't know, WinePay and Copier, who was speaking, was an operations person at MFI. So those of you who are operations for hubs, please lend him a hand. It's a new world for him, but that's why we're a community. One of the key points I want us to take away from that is that we talk in level 1 about, and I think I heard a lot of people talk about making sure that all DFSPs are allowed to participate. But I would challenge us to go beyond allowed to participate and enabled to participate. It is our job to reduce the cost and the barriers of participation so that we enable all different types of DFSPs to participate in payment systems. And again, great lessons from Myanmar about how they've been able to do that even for small MFIs. And the other great point that I think we heard from a few people, we heard it from the level 1 folks, we also heard it from Innocent, is the importance of merchant payments. We're going to be talking about merchant payments in Pillar 2 tomorrow, but I think what we're going to learn is not a lot of work was done in the last PI on merchant payments. So really want to challenge this group to step up in the next PI on merchant payments. Anybody wants to show themselves in the next PI, do some work on merchant payments, because I guarantee you're going to get a slot. Innocent pointed it out as an important part of, as one of the most important use cases we have to focus on, and we really haven't seen anybody jumping at it. And then one of the other things we talked about was the importance of pilots. We talked about the journey of those 3 countries on their until they go live, but there's a first step, which is a POC. And so what are we trying to prove in a POC? And that's a discussion that I'd like to be having with a lot of you over the next couple of days. So anyone has ideas or thoughts, please come and let me know. So that was our great business day. And then tomorrow we're going to jump in with Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 for some of the product. And very much looking forward to it, and hope everyone attends and is as engaged as they were yesterday. So Simeon, I think I can pass it over to you. Thank you so much for today.
All right, I will get you out in literally 2 minutes. Thank you for joining us today. Tomorrow we go into the workstream report outs. This is, for those of you who are new to our convening, the next 2 days sessions will essentially be our community showing all the amazing work that they've been doing over the last couple of months. We've got some really great updates. For those of you who are used to this model, I guarantee you we've got a couple of surprising sessions tomorrow, so you do want to show up for that. Here's the plan for today. At 6 p.m., we will meet at the Iriba Terrace. So that's up the stairs, walk to the reception desk, keep walking to the end of the hallway. There's a bar, turn right. There's a beautiful terrace there. At 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., we'll have cocktails there today. And then please remember tomorrow is picture day, so come in your Mojo Loop t-shirts. If you don't have one, there are a couple out at the desk, registration desk. You can pick one up. You don't have to wear the latest one. You can wear the one you came with from 2 PIs ago. That should be fine. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good rest of your day. See you at 6.